All right.
All right, I will call this meeting of General Government and Public Safety Committee to order at 9:37. We have a 2-item agenda. Are there any additions or changes? No? All right,
Move to approve the agenda as submitted.
second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have an agenda. All right, first on the agenda is the 2021-22 Public Records Update. Harry and Alyssa.
Morning, Councilmember Greenstein and Kunkel. This is our annual report to the committee on the public records. It's an update on the past data that we collected and submitted to JLARC for the year, and then also what we have learned from the 2022 requests so far this year. And Alyssa will be providing the presentation to you.
Good morning. With that, we can dive right in. As we mentioned, we're covering 2021, 2022 public record summary. We're going to advance the slide somehow. There we go. So what is a public record? This covers any writing that is prepared, owned, used, or retained by the agency. This covers sticky notes, voicemails, emails, really anything created, used by the agency to conduct business. The Public Records Act mandates that every government entity have a public records officer. So in 2015, the city declared the city clerk position the official public records officer via ordinance. So Perry is our designated PRO, and we have additional staff that are designated throughout city clerk and the police department to process individual requests. In 2017, government agencies were required to report to the Joint Legislative Audit Review Committee, so that's JLARC, on 18 different public records metrics. This requirement was for agencies that incurred costs exceeding $100,000 related to public records. The state legislator later amended the requirement, reducing it from 18 metrics to 15, and that's what we certainly report out on today. Public records litigation. Petitioners have a 1-year statute from the time a request is closed to file a lawsuit under the PRA. Penalties can range from $0 to $100 per day per record and are issued at a judge's discretion. And none of these litigation costs are covered by agency insurance. So looking at a quick look at total litigation costs incurred by comparable or neighboring jurisdictions for the year 2020. The first city here of a population of 37,000 incurred costs of over $900,000. Litigation costs include settlement amounts, penalties, attorney's fees. And then for the second city, population of 220,000 incurred costs of over $300,000.
Can you, which city?
For which one?
No, I
So
clarify that graph a little more, please.
Yes, so the first city here is a population of 37,000, and they reported that they incurred costs of 955,000 in litigation costs in 2020.
Okay.
Does that help answer the
Are we
question?
protecting the identity of the city? I think that's what you're trying to figure out. Is that?
Is
Oh,
that-
I can pull up that information.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay,
You're just using this as an example.
yeah, this is just other neighboring comparable,
Got it.
just to kind of show the volume that litigation costs and the impacts that it can have on
Okay.
jurisdictions. So looking at over the years, over 200 agencies are submitting data to JLARC. That number is growing, as we can see, throughout from 2018 to 2020. In 2018, this is the total cost of all reporting agencies that reported. Obviously, this shows that 2019 had a significant increase in litigation costs. It's worth noting that out of this 10 million, 4 agencies totaled over 6 million of it, just 4. So
Wow.
the remaining, what is that? 204 agencies covered the 4 million. So city litigation will follow with better news. The city was not subject to any Public Records Act claims for 2021. For 2020 and 2019, there were one lawsuit for each year. The city prevailed on all but one claim for both years and showed no bad faith for both lawsuits as well.
Cost of doing business these days.
Yeah.
We have successfully submitted our JLARC report on all 15 metrics. This includes metrics from the police department and joint animal services. For the following highlights for the 2021 data, over 2,500 requests were received. 75% of those requests were fulfilled electronically. 22% were closed with no responsive records. And 79% of those requests were closed within 5 business days. The total requests received did increase. Our 2020 data for that metric was 2,315. So we are seeing an increase
So 2,568 requests for public records.
for the year. So the city has a estimated cost of $383,000 incurred in fulfilling requests. This includes staff compensation, salary benefits, legal review. So if we take that number and look at our total, we have an average estimated cost of $147 per request. And for our expenses recovered and charging for disclosure or for records, we recovered $190 last year. That was actually for one request, just an individual request. So our fee schedule, as the city adopted the default charges set forth in statute, so this isn't something that we can change. As you can see here, the cost can be minimal depending on format, volume, everything of that nature. So if we were to take that fee schedule and apply it here to an example request. So example of a larger, more complex request, roughly 6 installments over the span of 9 months. We typically do an installment every 30 to 45 calendar days for larger, more complex requests. A request of this volume would take 30+ hours of focused staff time, none of which we can charge for. Looking at the example of over 450 individual documents. If the city wanted to apply the 15 cents per page for printed copies, we would be able to collect a total of just under $68 for this request. If we wanted to apply the 5 cents for every 4 attachments, we would be able to recover just over $5. And then for the 10 cents for every 1 gigabyte, it doesn't meet that threshold for kilobytes provided. So the cities as well as the PD have taken the approach that anything under $5, especially at this time with not being able to collect payment electronically, that we don't charge for anything over $5.
So insignificant what you'd get back anyway, it's irrelevant.
So our most commonly requested records, this hasn't really changed much. The city gets a large amount of requests for emails and correspondence, building plans, permits. The new Trackit software is assisting with that. People can self-serve, but it doesn't assist if they want actual physical copies. And code violations, a lot of anything related to. Police process a lot of requests for collision accident reports. Investigation reports and arrest records. And joint animal services process requests primarily for complaint, investigation reports, adoption records, and JASCOM meeting minutes, which are currently in the process of getting posted on the website. So there'll be some self-service there as well. Our most common exemptions. When redacting, we must cite the proper authority and provide an explanation of every redaction present. Those are done just by the staff that are actually processing the request themselves. It's not just done by anybody. Exemptions can be determined by the record type, where it exists, the relationship of the requester to the record. For example, if I'm seeking my own collision report, I'm not going to get my driver's license number redacted if it's my own. So the most common ones that we used for 2020, this is 2021, were driver's license numbers, juvenile records, social security numbers, And then the identity of a complainant, a victim, a witness, and healthcare information. And these typically don't change. These are the most popular. Our 2021 public records data broke out by the police department, city and joint animal services. The total number of requests closed by the PD was just over 2,000, and the average number of days to close the request was 5 days. So they have the bulk of our requests there over in the PD. The city processed a total of 281, which was an increase from last year. We processed 243. And then the average number of days to close requests actually decreased from 15 days down to 11 days from 2020 to 2021. And then Joint Animal Services went live using our public records portal in June of 2021. So we are now able to streamline the data collection for them as well, which is going to make a great impact and assist in compiling more accurate data, increase efficiency. And so they had 62 total public records requests closed for 2021. Our top 5 requester types, this is a metric that we track. This is input by staff, not by the requesters themselves. If a requester refuses to identify themselves or provide sufficient contact information, we respond to the extent feasible and consistent with the law. Requesters seeking information, we typically don't run into problems with contact information. They want us to contact them so that they can receive the records. Top 5 include law firms, organizations, governments, insurers, and individuals. And organizations include contractors, vendors, businesses. All of that's kind of included in that category.
As an example in governance.
Yeah, so crime victim unit, child protective services, adult protective services, a lot of law enforcement. We don't have data sharing agreements. And so really within statutes or anything that allow us to just process those requests. So they come in as public records requests.
Thank you.
So for 2021 public records estimated totals, these totals were provided previously to this committee last year. So we're just going to take a quick review at that total for 2021 and then look at the actual totals. So in red was the estimated numbers from the previous slide. And we were fairly close, if not under in most categories. We're seeing an increase in pretty much everything outside of average cost. A review of the previous year shows complexity of responding to the requests are increasing. We review total redactions, amount of staff time needed really impacts the complexity. So that's continuing to increase, as well as we are actually seeing a turnaround and increase in total requests as well. So looking at 2022, we have our actual totals here for January to July in blue. And then doing kind of the same projection, the estimated totals shown in red for the year 2022. And then for the average cost per request, the data needed to estimate the 22 was not yet available just due to multiple staffing changes, as well as onboarding additional positions and then impacts related to body worn camera. So we weren't wanting to estimate that total just yet.
Just gonna be a high demand for those records. Body
There's-
cams.
When will they go into, they go into service? When will we have everyone wearing body worn cameras? Will it be this year or next?
Well, probably next year, more than likely. They're still working on language.
I thought,
Yeah.
So complexity factors include data and record sharing over multiple platforms. We're all using technology and platforms and for our business need. And so sharing those records across departments. Records are being created quicker than we can apply disposition. Retention gets met and the clerk's office works with our department liaisons on applying disposition, but records are just getting created quicker and quicker. So that increases complexity. And then the on-site storage for physical records, we have a little bit less now, just with the electronic records being created, but there's physical storage in every department as well as the basement storage as well. So making sure we keep accurate records of what's being kept where. Broad requests over any and all, anything related to these are increasing, and they definitely increase the complexity and where we have to check and confirm and search for records. Being aware of sensitive and confidential material, reviewing everything can be complex, especially if sensitive or confidential material exists in files that aren't typical. Having outdated systems, not being able to get the data or the records out of an outdated system. We no longer have the components or CDs. So not all of our computers have CD drives. So being able to
Surprised any of them still have a CD drive.
and archiving solutions with social media, with text messaging, with Teams messaging, everything that the city does is captured by an archiving solution, and making sure that that is consistent across all platforms. And then our loss of the institutional knowledge with staff retiring and departing from the city, we're losing a lot of institutional knowledge, which really helps process some of these requests when staff have been here for a long length of time. Remember exactly where that file is. So the city clerk is making the following mitigating efforts. We continue our Public Records Act training for our primary disclosure staff. It's an ongoing effort. Currently in the process of updating public records training for new employees and onboarding. Encouraging consistent records management, best practices agency-wide, helping everybody do the job that they need to do, but also, make it easier for them in the long run when we come and ask for the records 6 months after they created it. Evolve with technology to keep up with growing demands. We've got cloud servers, we've got on-prem servers, just making sure we're doing what our due diligence and asking the right questions when technology is onboarded. And the city clerk serves as the liaison for all records retention and disposal processes. So that all comes through Perry. She signs off on everything. And so everything is disposed of and recorded in accordance with state law. With that concludes our presentation. Are there any questions?
It's a lot of work, that's for darn sure.
Do we still have any, for lack of a better term, frequent flyers? We had a few people I know a few years back that were putting in ridiculous broad requests for, we still having that issue that we were having?
I'll be afraid to say their names out loud.
But I wouldn't want you to say the name,
No,
but
no,
just, do we still have that? Is that still an issue? I know we had at one point, someone had requested, for instance, every email that you were sent or received.
Yeah, that one's now done.
I mean, that was for 20 years of email. Yeah, some of those are a little broad. Are we still having that kind of issue with some of
I
those people?
haven't seen that in the last year. I would say more so for community development, some of the firms that are seeking information on land parcels and, those types of records.
Okay.
More by topic than by the requester.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's at least a little more legitimate. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
and I'd like to
That's-
thank Alyssa for all her hard work in responding to these requests and putting together this presentation. She's done a great job.
Yeah, that was excellent. Thank you.
Gave me
I
access.
appreciate that. All right, moving on to our next agenda item, amendments to the Lacey Municipal Code. And I think you're presenting that, Milana?
Yeah,
Yeah, let me just, this is Lavonne Jensen. She's our acting HR director. Probably the first time you've met her, so she's doing a great job. We just wanted to bring in house cleaning item to the general government's committee's
She's
attention.
actually met.
Yeah, okay, good.
yeah. he's
Left
on our
one.
left.
Yes, there you go. Perfect.
Yeah, I apologize. Our general committee meetings were at 4 p.m. in the city I used to work for. So I was like, oh, they're in the mornings. I missed that. Otherwise, I would have been here for the whole presentation on public records. Anyway, so I came here in 2021 and the primary objective from my former boss was to take a look at our city policy manual and pretty much do an overhaul. I think it's been maybe a decade or more before, since they've been looked at comprehensively for law updates, practice changes. So we worked through that process, going through every section, reviewing it, and kind of taking a look at what we had in our collective bargaining agreements existing, our civil service rules existing. And then on January 1st of this year, we rolled out a comprehensive update to our personnel policies, which are kind of the governing guidance other than the CBAs and the civil service rules for employees. And because the city, I think in 1973, changed to the city manager form of government, the policies rather than the municipal code really should be the standing guidance for our non-represented employees and kind of like the fill-in for the CBAs and the civil service rules where they're silent. So our request is to do some cleanup, remove the 2.56 personnel policy municipal code, which I think is pretty dated. There's some very interesting terms and guidance in there that probably don't fly with today's political correctness terms. I'll just put it that way. So we would like to remove 2.56. And then in looking at some of the other policies, there's another one for oaths that needs to be updated. We checked with our insurers about how much does the city insure. And we've changed the figure, the dollar amount in that code to be $2 million of coverage. So those are the two kind of cleanup items that we have to present.
Can I ask the code that we're talking about changing, how does it read now?
The current code for, it's not moving. There we go.
How do you get yours to stand up like that?
What, doesn't yours stand up like this?
Off
Oh,
of
this
the,
is different.
So the oaths and performance bonds, all of the language in it is going to remain the same, but it basically talks about officers of the city taking an oath or affirmation of the performance of their duties, like the chief. And then it also talks about the coverage of performance bonds that's being provided.
in the previous code that we talked about.
Oh, and 2.56?
Yes.
Oh, it covers pretty much,
I think it's just the amount that's changing.
yeah, are you talking about 2.56 personnel policies? So there are many different entries on 2.56. It talks about benefits, it talks about compensation, it talks about, sexual harassment. There's all the things that you might think of when it comes to guidance for personnel. But our policy manual takes that information and then kind of doubles that because we were missing a lot of things that, you might typically look for guidance on around compliance, practice and procedure. So if you were to go out and just look, I mean, there's just off the top of my head, there were some different explanations that don't jive with what we now have in like leave laws or like for FMLA or for shared leave or for paid family medical leave. There's none of that in our code. So when we did the policy manual overhaul, I mean, that's kind of what we're looking at is that was our starting point, and then look for all of the updates that have since occurred and then build those into those different sections. So there are a lot of sections to 2.56. It's not just one standalone, but
Okay.
all of that information can now be found in our policy manual.
So probably just a quick summary of that is because we're under a council manager form of government or strong council form of government, is that you really have one employee, and that's the city manager. The rest of the personnel is guided by CBAs or personnel manual. So having in the code, actually, it doesn't need to be there. It shouldn't be.
We're not allowed to direct the other employees then?
No, that's against state law. That's good that you know that though. That's and then the bond reference, there used to be a bond cap of 150, but now it's 2 million. So we're just updating that number. So in our practice, all executive leadership team members take an oath and a bond. There's a reference to it in state law that talks about officers within the organization. And so that's what we deem those officers within the city of Lacey.
Which would be department heads.
Correct.
Mhm.
Yeah. And city clerk would be the addition.
Mhm. That makes sense.
So this doesn't need any action.
If
Does it?
we'd say a motion and approve.
So you need to
go
bring it to full council.
Correct.
So I would move that we send this to the amendments to the Lacey Municipal Code to the full council.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
That was easy.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you.
Likewise, yeah.
I'll see you at the next select board meeting. sir.
Yes, I will. I think I'll be there.
Yeah.
I think that brings us to the end of our agenda, so no objection, I will